All right, so chapter 6 on cartilage and bone connective tissue. We're going to talk a lot about these as tissues and how they apply to what we've been talking about with the appendicular and axial skeleton and articulations as well. So we'll start with the skeletal system, as we've talked about before, is an organ system composed of bones, cartilage, ligaments, and other supporting connective structure tissues. It also helps form a structural framework for soft tissues, sort of as the scaffolding on which soft tissues are attached, and allows us to stand upright instead of being a puddle of soft tissue. The skeletal system interacts with the muscular system to produce movement, which we talk a lot about in lab, where muscles attach to the skeleton and at particular points called origins and insertions, and as a result produce different actions. And then we want to always think of the skeletal system as not a static um, set of tissues, but as living tissues, dynamic tissues and organs, because they are constantly growing and remodeling themselves depending on the physical and physiological stresses that they're exposed to. So even though we think of bone as being rigid, it's actually very dynamic, constantly reshaping and forming based on sort of the mechanical stresses and physical stresses that it encounters. So we can remind ourselves about the how we classify connective tissues, starting with that original mesenchyme, that are the stem cells that are undifferentiated into the different kinds of connective tissues. And as they differentiate into specific types, from connective tissue proper categories here to supporting connective tissue, we're looking at cartilage and bone, which is what we're focusing on, or fluid connective tissue, specifically blood, so we've already talked about fluid connective tissue and connective tissue proper. So this chapter focuses on this middle group here. All right, so we'll be looking at the 3 types of cartilage and 2 types of bone tissue as well. Now, cartilage can be described as having an extracellular matrix that is semi-solid or gel-like, and is composed of collagen, which gives cartilage its tensile strength, meaning it can't be pulled along the long axis of the axis of the cartilage fibers, but is flexible, sort of in a transversely across the fibers. It also contains elastin and water, which gives cartilage some resilience. So you might think about the tip of the nose, the auricle of the ear, where you can sort of pull those in different directions and they go back to their original shape. That's its resilience. Cells of cartilage are called chondroblasts or chondrocytes. So we'll look here in the diagram. The chondrocytes are the cells that you see sort of in the interior of the cartilage, and we're looking at hyaline cartilage here, whereas chondroblasts are over here within just interior to the perichondrium, that are on the periphery of the cartilage. So chondroblasts are the cells that produce the extracellular matrix, the collagen, the elastin, the ground substance. And once they produce that extracellular matrix, they become entrapped by that extracellular matrix, which again is semi-solid like, and they're contained within a space which you can see surrounding the cell called a lacuna. And when they become entrapped in that lacuna, then they're referred to as chondrocytes. So chondroblasts produce the extracellular matrix. Chondrocytes are then what they become when they're trapped by that extracellular matrix. All right. Then we can also think about the fact that this semi-solid like extracellular matrix makes it difficult for blood vessels to penetrate. We don't have sort of designated passageways for blood vessels to enter cartilage, so it tends to be avascular, which means that its nutrient and waste is exchanged by diffusion through the tissue very slowly. And if you reflect on sort of healing time for cartilage, it takes a while for healing to occur because of that. Now the perichondrium is this outer layer of the cartilage, and it's composed of dense, irregular connective tissue plus chondroblasts. So that's one of the cell types that we just talked about, chondroblasts within the perichondrium. So they're not trapped by that extracellular matrix. and so they continue to produce extracellular matrix to allow that cartilage to sort of to grow peripherally. So we'll talk about cartilage growth in just a minute. There are three different types of cartilage, starting with hyaline cartilage. Everywhere over here in the skeleton diagram that's blue shows us hyaline cartilage locations. So hyaline cartilage is the most common type of cartilage. It supports soft tissues such as in the nose, also in the trachea, which I don't think we have a good diagram of here, and larynx. It forms the tracheal rings, and let's see. It also makes up the fetal skeleton, which we'll talk about with regard to bone development, as well as the growth plates in bones, which we'll talk about with bone growth. So the cartilage is important for bone development as well. And we've talked before about how hyaline cartilage is also found in articular cartilage as well, articular cartilage here, as well as costal cartilage here. Now, these are the three types. When we look at hyaline cartilage, we see that the histological slide shows sort of the chondrocytes here trapped in the white colored lacunae, the spaces that surround the cell. And the opaque area is where there's a high concentration of collagen. And the collagen is sort of submicroscopic, and it's has submicroscopic fibers that make the slide appear opaque. So they're very densely packed, which helps give that tensile strength to the cartilage. Fiber cartilage is another type. And I will mention hyaline cartilage has that outer layer of perichondrium that we mentioned. The reason I emphasize that is because fiber cartilage does not have perichondrium. So in fiber cartilage, we can see the locations here in the red, the intervertebral discs, the symphysis pubis, and the menisci of the knee joint. The collagen fibers are packed in bundles, as you can see in the slide here, sort of wavy bundles. There are very large chondrocytes that are trapped within lacunae. Right here, this whole thing here would be the lacuna, this would be the chondrocyte, and then the nucleus of the chondrocyte in the center. Again, there's no perichondrium in fiber cartilage, and that's because fiber cartilage function is to absorb shock and to resist compression. So if there was a perichondrium present every time that fiber cartilage absorbed, an impact, then the perichondrium would sort of burst from the surface. It's not advantageous for it to have a perichondrium. All right, so that's fibrocartilage. And then the third type is elastic cartilage, which we can see down here. Again, the chondrocytes trapped within a surrounding lacuna with lots of elastic fibers, sort of a mesh-like arrangement of fibers surrounding the chondrocytes. And so the elastic fibers give elastic cartilage those characteristics of being flexible as well as resilient, meaning they can return to their original shape. Elastic cartilage does have a perichondrium, and we find elastic cartilage in the auricle of the ear and over here in the epiglottis. This little inset shows us where the epiglottis is. And the epiglottis has to cover the opening to the larynx when we swallow so that food is guided into the esophagus. So the epiglottis has to have that ability to conform to the shape of the larynx and then return to its original shape. All right, so we're going to look at some growth patterns of cartilage next, starting with how cartilage grows in two ways. Interstitial growth is growth from within the cartilage itself by way of the chondrocytes, activity of the chondrocytes themselves. So these in interstitial growth, which is really important during fetal development, the chondrocytes are mitotically active. Once the cartilage is mature, well before that, the appositional growth is the second manner of growth, which also occurs during fetal development. But once the cartilage is mature, interstitial growth stops, and the only growth that continues is appositional growth for repair of injury. So appositional growth is growth along the periphery or the outside edge of the cartilage. whereas interstitial growth is growth from within. And because the extracellular matrix gets kind of rigid through as development continues, then interstitial growth becomes difficult for the cartilage. So that's why apositional growth tends to be the type of growth that continues and then into adulthood for injury repair. Apositional growth is carried out by the chondroblasts. So for interstitial growth, we're looking at these chondrocytes in the center of the hyaline cartilage, focusing on that with these different steps here that are highlighted, starting with a chondrocyte. Here's the chondrocyte, the outside lacuna is shown, and then the blue area is the matrix, the extracellular matrix. So it becomes mitotically active. It produces another cell here, another chondrocyte, and as they begin to separate, they begin to separate as a result of producing extracellular matrix individually. So each chondrocyte starts to produce extracellular matrix, which is going to drive a wedge between those cells and separate them, and then they'll just continue to produce more and more extracellular matrix. So this results in growth from within the cartilage itself, or interstitial growth. Then if we look at apositional growth, again, we're now focused on the chondroblasts that are within the perichondrium that are responsible for apositional growth. And again, this does occur during fetal development, as does interstitial, but apositional growth continues beyond that period of time as children grow and so forth into adulthood for injury repair. So in this type of growth, we have a lot going on in the slide here. We'll start with the top panel here, and we have mesenchymal cells, which are the stem cells that are undifferentiated. We're showing some specific undifferentiated cells here that you can see are undergoing mitosis. So when they undergo mitosis, they're producing these committed cells. The committed cells are then, let me get my pointer, the committed cells are here, and they're going to differentiate into chondroblasts. So we have, again, mesenchymal cells that are undifferentiated and dividing. They divide into committed cells that are going to differentiate into chondroblasts, which we see over here. Once they develop into chondroblasts, then the chondroblasts start to produce the extracellular matrix that you can see surrounding the chondroblasts. And when they produce enough of it, they'll separate and continue to produce new matrix, but eventually that matrix becomes thick enough here that they become entrapped and are then going to become the chondrocytes, as you see in the older cartilage matrix. So this is the development or the growth of cartilage apositionally, again from the perichondrium. So this covers our discussion of cartilage, different kinds of cartilage, hyaline, fiber cartilage, and elastic cartilage, where to find them, and their histological characteristics, as well as how they contribute to growth of cartilage interstitially as well as apositionally. Okay, so then in the next couple of video recordings, we will talk about bone.